The word of the Lord came to John in the wilderness. The word of the Lord came to John in the wilderness. That was years ago. And John came out of the wilderness with the word of the Lord. That's what John had. Do you know that, Clyde?
I did.
But you don't know that I have it today. Or you might question whether I do or not. I have the word of the Lord today. And if anybody sees this video, they will have heard me say it today. I have the word of the Lord today. Jesus had the word of the Lord in his day, as did John. And Mr. Buzzard, I want you to know that Paul also got the word of the Lord. The word of the Lord came to Paul also, just like the word of the Lord came to me years ago, and I stood in the conference in Atlanta and told you what God said. Because God said through me in Atlanta, Georgia, at the last conference that you held on the grounds of the United Methodist Church. I was there for that conference. That was the last time that you held a conference on Methodist grounds. Since then, can you believe, Clyde, that it's been held at the Calvin Center? If there had been this year's conference, it would have been held at the Calvin Center in Atlanta or in South Atlanta. I don't know exactly what street it's on. You can look it up, Clyde, if you want to know. It was not held. I don't know that this conference will be held in October, but I'm registered. I am the volunteer leader over the state of Louisiana, as far as I know, for the Unitarian Christian Alliance. So I may get old Sam the Sham. I may get Sam the Sham wanting to talk to me, Clyde.
Never know.
But if I do, if God says to me, it's time for you and Sam to get it on, it will be on. I guarantee you. But anyway, the word of the Lord came to John. And the word of the Lord came to John, and John could understand some things because he could hear God. That's what John could do. John could hear God. And John did what God told him to do. And when John was out there, he was listening to God one day, and God said, let these people know that right there is the one. who's coming after you. There he is. Baptize him. John had a little bit of problem, but he didn't have too bad a problem, because John baptized Jesus, and that's the day the heavens opened up, Clyde. Hey. And right down out of heaven, somebody saw it, because I can read about it. Somebody saw it and told somebody it was seen. I read about it. And Jesus was baptized by John. And he was immediately, which means that day, compelled into the wilderness by God. I'm not looking at Clyde. I'm looking at myself in the video. I'm looking at Clyde now. So you can see, for me to look at Clyde, I don't have to turn my head much. Clyde is enjoying, his coffee's gone. He's drinking out of a red can now. But I'm enjoying talking about this word of the Lord that came to John, which instructed him to baptize one that was coming to him that day. I mean, John had done scathed a few before Jesus got there. He had done called some people a brood of vipers. I don't know if that went over well, Clyde.
Not sure.
Probably not, though. But that didn't stop him from telling them, who warned you to flee from the wrath of God? And that's what came into John's mind, because that's what he said. And I read about it in my history book. Jesus went into the wilderness where he was for 40 days. In the wilderness where John had been for years. John had learned how to eat locusts, and he might have dipped them in honey, I don't know. But I do know that was what his diet was, locust and honey. I got that out of the history book. And Jesus goes into the wilderness, and he becomes hungry, because after not having anything to eat for 40 days, that's what you get. But you got hungry before the 40th day. I really feel like that's the way it was. How about you, Clyde? You think you could go 7 days without being hungry if you didn't eat nothing?
I'd be hungry, I'm sure.
I'm sure too. But anyway, Jesus is out there in the wilderness, and he's out there. He's not out of body. He's not out of body. But you know what I found out, Clyde?
What's that?
God can make somebody blind without any problem.
That's true.
He does not have a problem keeping people from seeing something if he don't want them to see it.
Block their knowledge.
It ain't just their knowledge. It says that the devil had Jesus on the pinnacle, whatever that means, of the temple. In other words, he's done come out of. But somebody says, oh no, that was what's that word they want to use? Anapholy, what?
Anomaly.
Phenomena, for something. But I believe that the devil was standing with Jesus, and Jesus was standing up there, and the devil says to him, he's already said to him, if you are the Son of God. Like Jesus don't know who he is. It wasn't, Jesus didn't have a problem knowing who his Father was. He made that clear when he was 12. Anthony, that means Joseph and Mary had told him a few things by the time he was 12 years old. And Jesus learned well, and his Father in heaven was pleased with him. Because that's what he said the day John baptized him. And he was still pleased with him at the end. 3 years or so later, after he was crucified, God was still pleased with Jesus. He's still pleased with him today. God does not have any problem with Jesus. The problem is on the earth where Jesus saw Satan cast out of heaven. Saw Satan fall like lightning. I don't know how Jesus saw it. Everybody else didn't see it, but Jesus saw it. Because Jesus said, I saw Satan fall. And he told them boys, because they boys come back, Clyde, they had been sent out to some cities, and they had come back. And Jesus told them, I know how you feel. Because you have been given authority over. And you have gone out. But what you better be really thankful for is that your names are written in heaven. That's what he told them. There's going to be a judgment day, Clyde. It's not been yet, but there's going to be. I don't know when. But the books are going to be opened. And I don't really care what people think about what I say. Anthony Buzzard, Clyde don't care either. I know he don't care. And I got 1 minute to finish this, to stay in my 15-minute mark. And I think I can do it. I do. The Son of Man will appear. And when he does, that's when you'll find out what God can do. John told some people, he said, you see these stones? God can raise up children to Abraham from those stones. When Jesus appears, Clyde, God's going to glorify some sons and daughters. And there's going to be a few that are disappointed.